sfârșit am reușit să ne sincronizăm cu programul foarte încărcat al lui Hawke. Ea este aici nu să ne vorbească despre Ethan, deși cred că auditoriul feminin nu s-a supărat, și să ne spună cum este să o iei de la capăt, nu la prima tineret. Ea s-a înrolat în Episcop când avea 48 de ani, deja practic este viața, cel puțin cu standardele noastre, nu? A făcut o serie de joburi corporate, schimbase mai multe case, una mai mare ca alta, crescuse copii, divorțate și încerca să o ia de la capăt. A aterizat la 48 de ani în România, la propriu, și nu-și propuse să se stea mai mult de 2 ani. Iată că au trecut 12, este încă aici, unde alături de Maria Gheorghiu a fondat una dintre cele mai mari asociații, Inspiro, un ONG care militează pentru școlarizarea copiilor săraci. Ea este aici să ne povestească despre cum nu e niciodată dreaptă să de la capăt și să ne dea o doză de curaj. Leslie, please join me. And thank you all for being here.
Picture? No, that's not the picture. Technology. Okay, I want to start with an ad, actually, for a friend of mine who's going to be here next week, next Friday, on the 13th. His name is Andrew Solomon, and he wrote just about the most famous book ever published on the subject of depression. Now, I'm sure Neil never was depressed, right, Neil?
I was.
But this book was published in 2002 and was a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize and won the National Book Award. And it wasn't until 12 years later that it was published in Romanian. Here it is. All right. Good. So you're invited to the launch of this book and to hear Andrew Solomon speak. Next Friday. And he is one of those people that has several fantastic TED Talks that I encourage you to listen to or watch his TED Talks on YouTube, because they're really inspiring. Okay, so how are we doing over there, ladies? Well, obviously, I'm following up on Neil's presentation to talk about what you do after you grow up. Because actually, life today is really, really long. And I'm going to propose 3 simple rules based on my own life experience. And the rule number 1, which actually fits with what's going on right here, is make peace with the internet. A couple of days ago, I sat down to prepare my remarks, and I found my mind wandering. So I did what all normal people do today. I checked my inbox, and there was an essay on focusing. So I'm going to read you a couple of the first paragraphs of this essay from the New York Times. And sooner or later, I'm sure we'll make this thing work. Okay, I quote from this article. Like everyone else, I am losing the attention war. I toggle over to my emails when I should be working. I text when paying attention to the people in front of me. Anybody texting? Ah, you are. I spend hours looking at mildly diverting stuff on YouTube. Anybody else do that? And like everyone else, I've nodded along with the sermons, imploring me to limit my information diet, stop multitasking, turn off the devices at least once a week, don't check your email in the middle of the night. And of course, these sermons have no effect. Most of us lead lives of distraction, unable to focus on what we know we should focus on. The lesson is, this is from the article, the lesson is, don't try to say no to all the trivial distractions. Try to say yes to the subject that arouses your longing. And let your obsession crowd out everything else. Well, obviously, the guy who wrote that doesn't have a day job. He doesn't work at JTI or P&G. But it did make me realize why my life is so rewarding. And why people often comment to me, gosh, you seem happy. And I don't think of myself as particularly happy. I think of myself as completely overwhelmed most of the time. But I do feel like what I am doing is really, really important. I spent almost 3 decades not feeling that what I was doing was important. I think I'm about to catch up with myself. Hold on. Okay. Now I'm ahead of myself. I am obsessed with my work. It's what I want to be doing all the time, and that is a really, really good feeling. And I will circle back to that idea in a few minutes. Okay, rule number 2. Your first 40 years really have to be about yourself. Don't worry too much about giving back until you're at least 40. And sometimes later, it's like what they tell you on the airplane. Fix your own oxygen supply before you can help somebody else with theirs. I came to Romania as a Peace Corps volunteer at the age of 48. At 25, I would have joined, but I would have been useless. But at 48, I knew who I was. I had a sense of my talents, and very importantly, I had a sense of my limits. And I had no sense of these things when I was 25. I wanted to do everything at 25, and I secretly feared I was good at nothing. So the corollary to this rule, I often think of, I have in my notebook, it's by Wendell Berry, who was an American poet and environmentalist. And he ended his address to a university graduating class several years ago with the following advice. Make a home. Help to make a community. Making a home, I think, for most Romanians is a pretty easy thing to do. It's a very family-oriented culture. But to help make a community, that was hard. Because I think for most of you, it wasn't in your parents' repertoire. It's kind of a lost art in the city. It's abundant in Romanian villages, I think, and I urge you to cultivate it. Create community through your children's school, through your neighborhood, through your own professional network. There are many different ways of creating community, and it's really important. Put the interest of the community first. That's not instinctive for most of us. But when you live in an urban environment, it is crucial if you have any hope of of living a harmonious life. If you think about cities that are wonderful to be in, Paris, Copenhagen, Berlin, San Francisco, London, you'll find that they have a very strong civic infrastructure, that they put community first, not the foreign developers, not even the local developers. Love your neighbors. But this one's really tricky too. You cross to the old lady downstairs, the noisy kids. These aren't the neighbors you pick out. These are the neighbors that you actually have. Find work, if you can, that does no damage. Enjoy your work. Work well. Even if you don't think it's very important, which for many years the work I was doing I didn't think was very important. What I didn't know was how many skills I was learning that were going to be hugely important to me later on. It's important to your own integrity to do things well. A friend of mine recently had some work done on her apartment, and when she came back, the floor was tilted. And she goes, "Yo, look at this. It's not even level." And the guy said, "You didn't pay me to make it level. You paid me to do it." Don't be like that. What goes around comes around. And they do come around. And then your second 40 years can be about others. I always wanted to make the world a better place, but I couldn't figure out how I could do that and make a decent living. And have a nice house, and send my son to good schools, and wear nice clothes. I wanted these things as much as the next person. But it wasn't all I wanted, and there was a tremendous conflict in my mind. One vacation I went to Africa with a group in 1985, and we visited refugee camps and development projects and talked to missionary couples, nuns, and aid workers. And I took from that two important lessons. One is that it's not all about money. It's not about throwing money at problems. It's about understanding the problems really deeply and having really long-term investments in them. Which is why I've been in Romania for 14 years, and I plan to stay at least a total of 20. And secondly, it's about doing what's right in front of you, what's right there that needs to be done. But it was 15 years before I got an opportunity to use what I had learned. In 1999, my son was grown, he had a family of his own, I was bored with my job, and I decided that my life needed a little shaking up. So on a whim, I joined the Peace Corps, which you may know is a U.S. organization that sends volunteers to foreign countries for 2 years. Well, the Peace Corps, I was hoping it would send me to Ecuador, but they sent me to Hawke, Romania. I arrived in 2000, age 48, without a clue of what I was going to do. But what captured my attention were the children, young children, who were begging on the street. And it really just tore me up. And I became obsessed with this issue. And my obsession led to a series of rather fortunate events. I was open. I didn't have a full-time job to take all my attention. I could spend my time watching what was going on. And also, probably most importantly, I had nothing to lose. I was a stranger in a strange place. And I got a grant to start a program for these kids. I had no idea if it would work. But I thought, hey, I'm here. Might as well try it. it evolved that way. And we were able, step by step, to get the authorities to support our efforts to get these kids in school. And it's the most rewarding thing I've ever done. And people often ask, well, so why are you still here? Well, first of all, because the job's not finished, because there's still at least 60,000 kids who are not getting a good start in school because of poverty. But most importantly, the reason, what's very compelling to me is that if I wasn't here doing this, nobody else would probably be doing what I'm doing. And I think it's really about healing what's in front of you. And of course, there's a lot in Romania that needs to be fixed. And the question is really, what are the things that need to be fixed that you really care about? And I think the most important thing as you go through life is to look around and to see what needs taking care of that I might actually be able to contribute to. And one way to do that is to ask, what upsets me? You know, what really gets to me? A good way to investigate is to volunteer. The youth in America are told they should volunteer, and when I was young it sounded like fun, and I tried a lot of different things, and they weren't very much fun. I didn't really become a successful volunteer until I was 48 years old in Hawke, Romania. And that's, I think, because I saw something that deeply upset me. I had the experience, I had the tools to have some idea of how to deal with it. And I tried, and one thing led to another. For me, it took a long time to get there. I suggest that you look around and see what needs to be done in your world, and consider becoming obsessed. And now, I hope we're going to hear some words from a famous philosopher and songwriter named Cole Porter.
Before you leave these portals to meet less fortunate mortals, there's just one final message I would give to you. You all have learned reliance on the sacred teachings of science, so I hope through life you never will decline, in spite of Philistine defiance. Do what all good scientists do. Experiment, make it your motto day and night. Experiment, and it will lead you to the light. The apple on the top of the tree is never too high to achieve. So take an example from Eve. Experiment. Be curious, though interfering friends may frown. Get furious at each attempt to hold you down. If this advice you always employ, the future can offer you infinite joy and merriment. Experiment and you'll see.
But nobody wanted. They are not good dancers, I guess. I don't know why. So
hard to do on the spur of the moment.
Yeah, I guess. We should have practiced before. Tell me, what's your life now in Romania? You said that you plan to stay at least 20, at most 20 years. Why 20 years?
Because 20 years is a generation, and I don't think that any son problem can be solved in less than 20 years, just like you really can't rear a child. You can't have a kid at the age of 5 or 6 go, okay, I spent some time with you, I worked on this problem, I think I'll go and do something else. Having a kid, raising a child, is a 20-year project. And I think making social change is at least takes one generation. So I felt like if I'm really serious about doing this, I gotta do it and see. And it may not even, I may not feel like I've done it after 20 years, but I think by then I'll feel like, well, I tried. I can go home.
I'm talking a lot every month with people from the corporate business, and I think that after 5 years of recession, it's a lot of frustration and people are not satisfied with their lives. Do you really think that involving yourself in social problems is a way to make yourself happy? Is a solution for them? Do you advise it?
I don't know about happy. I think the important thing is to feel fully engaged. And if your work doesn't fully engage you and you can't figure out how to make it fully engage you, but you've got to do it, then other areas of your life. I went to Africa in 1985 because I was really interested in international development, but there was no way I could quit my job on Madison Avenue and go be a missionary in Africa. But I went and visited, I learned things. So I think just learning about the things you think might interest you, and like I said, volunteering and trying different things, experimenting.
Do you have any questions for Leslie? Nobody?
Hello, Leslie. I'm curious about how you feel like living in Romania. Do you enjoy living in Romania and Bucharest, spending time and visiting the country?
Well, I don't have too much time to visit the country. I'm usually working, so when I do visit, it has to do with going to schools and programs and wherever the work takes me. But Romania is a really interesting place. Romania is, everybody says it, and it's really true. It's never boring here. And I came from a place that was very full of itself, called Texas. And the problem with Texas was it wasn't boring. And so I would much rather be here. Because there are challenges. There are so many things. There's so many things that need to be done here. It's like living on the frontier. There's so much to do. That's really exciting, but it can also be exhausting. As you know, this is not a place. I thought I was going to the Peace Corps. I'd have time to read War and Peace, and then maybe dabble a little and do good projects. But that's not what happened. And I'm assuming that you all also probably feel much of the time overwhelmed and how much there is to do.
Would you do exactly the same thing again?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you a lot.
Thank you.